Okay, for this video, we're going to practice creating a database and also deleting them. Okay, and we're also going to see how to modify the settings of a database. So, to start with, I have MAMP already running, and in fact, not that that matters, but what matters is you have the MySQL server running. So be sure to open MAMP, and after maybe uh, half a minute or so, go ahead and start your servers and just wait for these to be read. Once they're up and running, do not close them. Do not close MAMP, just minimize it and proceed to opening your workbench. Okay, so MySQL workbench. Okay. So if you have installed this before, you should have a connection set up already. If not, you should consider creating a new connection. All right. Now it's important to remember that the MySQL server that's installed when you install MAMP creates an account with a username called root. The password is also root. Okay, ROOT. All right, so I have a connection here, and all I have to do is click this, and it's going to prompt for the password. I'm going to type root. I can choose to save that. I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to click OK. All right, so it's connecting, and once you're connected, this is what you're supposed to see. All right, let me maximize this window. All right, so just a little bit of a tour of the workbench. This is not, I mean, this is the help, automatic context help. So you can disable that by clicking this button here all the way to the right. So that's a toggle. So if you need that, if by any chance you want that context help, or if you want to see snippets, if you're taking advantage of these features of the workbench, which we won't in this course, you can turn that off or turn that on. Okay, all by clicking that button. You can also hide some of these if you have limited screen space. You can hide these, well, basically the navigator, these options by clicking this button over here. But for the most part, as you're working here, you want to keep these present and also the output. The output is going to tell you the result of running your statements, okay? Now, if you want to change the size of the font over here, you can, well, what I do is I press the control key on my keyboard and then I use the scroll button or the scroll wheel in the mouse. So I'm basically spinning it down to make the font bigger. So I'm going to just make that big enough so you can see it in this video. Okay. Now, you have some other things here like server status. You can click that. It's going to open a tab here. Right, before I did that, I have a tab called Query 1 where I could have typed a SQL statement. But clicking server status apparently opened this tab showing me basically information about my MySQL server that's running in my computer. So that's not needed right now. So we can just close that. Okay. Okay. Should close anytime soon. Okay. All right. So you have also client connections. Basically, just showing the connections established to your MySQL server. Another important element here is the users and privileges. Okay, so this allows you to view the different user accounts created in your MySQL server. This is also where you can change the password. Um, Pretty much, if you're doing development, you wouldn't need to touch this. Only in the production environments where you have to really decide on creating accounts and setting privileges. Um, and this is also where you can find options to export your data. Okay, and this is something that we're going to cover down the line. And also, this is where you can import your data, as you can see, okay, or restore it. So if you have exported your data, if you want to bring it over here, like let's say you're working and you built your database in another computer and you exported it. This is the option that you want to use to bring that database or perhaps just the data into your workbench, okay, or into your database rather, okay. So anyway, so going back to query one. So how do we create a database? Now, according to the MySQL documentation, um, let's open that, okay. So create database syntax is pretty straightforward. We just need to type create database, or you can use schema. They're basically synonyms, but for the most part, we use create database. We can also add if not exists to say that right here it says an error occurs if the database exists and you did not specify if not exists. So you can use that as a check, or you can so let's say if you're incorporating the statement as part of the programming of an application or a website, you can make use of that modifier. And you also have to indicate the character set and the collation. So just like in my lecture, character set pretty much on a practical level indicates what kind of symbols and their respective encodings will be allowed in that database. The encoding is essentially like a numeric value. Every symbol in a collection of characters, you know. So let's say the letter A, there's a corresponding number or value to it, numeric value to it. Collation setting is well, if you look up the word collation in the dictionary, it's like how the way things are arranged. So indeed, the collation setting in some sort of way, it indicates to the database how you want your data to be arranged or handled. So do you want uppercase, words in with the capital first letter to be handled or to be listed first than words with a lowercase first letter. So things of that nature are covered by the collation. So you can check out the details in the reference that I listed in the lecture. So um, let's go back to Workbench. So let's say we're going to create a database called school. Now SQL is not case sensitive, so you don't have to type it in uppercase like the way you see it in the syntax or in the references. So you can type it in lowercase like that. It won't hurt if you type it like so. See, it will pretty much give you the same thing. Okay. So let's create a database. All right. And then according to the syntax, in fact, let me do a split. So I'm gonna put this guy over here. There you go. So we can see both of them at the same time and collapse this one. All right. So create database. Um, and we can choose not to put the if not exists for now. So I'm going to put a database name. So I'm going to call it school. Now, is that case sensitive? It's not in SQL, but because your database is meant to be used as part of a website or an application, I think it's best that you keep things in lowercase when it comes to naming things. It's really up to you if you want to come up with a convention for naming them, such as, like, for example, we can type here computer school. And this is what's called camel case, where if you have the name is composed of two words, and then the second word basically starts with a capital letter. And if you have a third word, it'll also have a capital letter. Yeah, so that's why it's called camel case. It's like, the middle, is sticking up like that. So anyway, I just want to call it school. And then according to the syntax, we have to indicate the specification. Well, the square brackets here denote that this part is optional in the same way that these have square brackets. So that means that this is how you read the syntax. The syntax would say, well, that's optional, okay? But in practical basis, You would type create database followed by the name, and then you would put um, character set equals. Now, this is the other part of this discussion. So, what kind of character sets are available to us? So, there's a reference in the reference manual. If you look at this, there's a section here, character sets, collations, Unicode. In fact, I linked this in my lecture. Let's open it in another tab. Now, I'm going to use the, okay, so what's going on here? Uh-oh. Alright, so anyway, I'm going to use one of the, there you go, one of the common character sets that's used in not only in databases but also even in web design, you know, application development. I'm going to use the setting called UTF-8. This is called the Unicode character set, and this character set supports quite a lot of characters from across different languages. And to do that, you can just put here UTF-8. Okay. Right. In fact, the workbench would actually display, a selection here, so you can pick UTF-8, and that's you can use that to your advantage to find out if you're typing your character set properly. Notice I used single quotes. I could have used double quotes, but in SQL, in SQL, we use single quotes. Okay. All right, and then according to the create database syntax, we have to also indicate the collation name. So we can put here collate equal, and then the collation name. Collation name, there's also a list of them. So here are a few of them, and there's actually a lot. So for example, typically when you use the UTF-8 character set, you want to use the collation called UTF-8 general CI. So we can put here UTF-8. Okay, and if this comes up, you can use this, scroll down and find UTF-8 general CI right there. You can just double click it to pop it in place. Now, as a good practice, we terminate the SQL statement with a semicolon. Okay, so let me, in fact, let me shrink this. All right. So, right now we don't have any X marks or anything, so we should be good. So how do you run this? How do you test this? Now in the workbench, you can click on the menu bar, click query, and as you can see here, you have several ways to run that statement. If you want to run everything that's in here, you can go query and then execute all or selection right here, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control Shift Enter. Now Control Enter, as you can see here, will run the statement where your cursor is blinking. Now right now we only have two statements. This is not three statements. This is one statement that's just broken into 3 lines. And yes, that is perfectly legal. In SQL, you can type the whole thing in 1 line. As a matter of fact, it won't matter. But just like sentences in the English language, we put let's say a period at the end or a dot to denote the end of the sentence. So here we put a semicolon. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So query, I'm just going to use this one, execute. Okay. So according to the output panel, so you're not going to see any fancy window or anything, but according to the output panel, it says here 1 row affected. It took about 0.016 seconds. So sometimes that matters. Okay. And it's a check mark, so it should be good. So how do we know? Okay, it does say here that it worked, but is there are there any other indicators that would say, well, that database has been created? Well, fortunately in Workbench there is one. So I'm going to go and bring up the left sidebar, and I'm going to go here where it says test, right? And I'm sorry, where it says schemas. I'm going to click on the refresh button, and right there is test. Right there is school. Okay, so we got the test that's been there since. That's like a sample database basically. And then, but we have the school database and right there. Now, because I don't have the if not exists, since the school database is already present, if I attempt to run this query again, let's see what's going to happen. Okay. All right. So now I got an X mark and it says can't create database school. Database exists. So that's the message down here. If you put your mouse pointer over it, it gives you a description. And that makes sense. I mean, I have a school database already, so to create another one with the same name, that's not possible. You cannot have um, uh, two or more databases with the same name. The name of the database has to be unique within one MySQL server. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is just to continue this is I'm gonna save this query. So I'm going to click on File, Save Script. Okay, so of course it's going to prompt me where to save it. So what you can do is, this is really up to you, So what I would do is, let's say I'll put it in Documents. I'll create a folder. I'll call this Week 2. I'm going to go in here and say, I'm going to call this, yeah, I don't know, create school database. So it's up to you what you want to call it. Even put hyphens there. Yeah, let me get rid of the hyphens. I don't need them. Create school database. Save as type SQL. I'm gonna go ahead and click save. And just like that, the file gets saved. So if you need to run a statement later on, you can save it, and then if you want to run it again at a later time, you can click on File, Open SQL Script, and then all you got to do is find the SQL file and click, to open it. So, oops, I don't need to do that since it's already open. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna keep that. Um, I want to create another database just for the sake of playing with this. So I'm gonna do, just to make my life a little easier, is I'm gonna copy that, and I'm gonna actually go down here and paste that same statement, but this time I'm gonna call this database, I don't know, let's say shoe store. Okay. Alright, so I'm gonna use the same character set and collation settings, but notice now that I have two statements inside one SQL file. Now, is that possible? Yep, actually, more often than not, you're going to have several statements in one SQL file. The more complex the projects or the examples we work on, you're going to have more statements, more and more statements here. So basically, I already have the school database. Okay, so how do I run just this statement? Okay, now as long as my cursor is blinking anywhere within this statement, I can use this option to just run this statement. Okay, so I can just click up here, query. And instead of using execute all or selection, I'm going to use execute current statement. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click that. Alright, so see the check mark, one row affected. So let's see, that should have created our shoe store database. Let's refresh the schemas. Aha, there you go. So there's the shoe store database. Okay. All right. So I can save this file. I already saved it, so if I save it again, it'll just update the file that I already saved earlier. All right. So yeah. So just keep in mind those, two options or two ways to run your queries. You can remember the keyboard shortcuts if you want, make it easier for you. Alright, so I'm going to close this. I don't need this right now. And I'm going to go and click File, New Query tab. You can also click any of this button here. So either way, it's File, New Query tab, or click on the very first button here in this toolbar. It'll give you a tab. Now you might say, Joel, it says SQL file 4. It doesn't say query 1. Don't worry about that. It's just a dummy name initially. When you save it, that's going to change altogether later on. Alright, so I'm going to press the control key. and scroll down. You can try in your mouse which one works. If you, I'm scrolling down to make the font bigger. Okay, so let's talk about uh, deleting the database. So I wanna keep this cool, but I don't wanna keep the shoe store anymore. Okay. Now some of you might say, "Oh, Joel, can't you delete it from here?" That is true. You can actually do some basic database manipulation over here. But why am I not using that? Well, this class is about SQL. I mean, you're supposed to learn the statements to manipulate your database, to define your database and structure, and to manipulate the data in it using commands, using statements, because these statements ultimately are the ones that will end up in your websites, in your applications, in your mobile apps. So why do you need to learn these statements? Well, obviously because you're going to need them to create your software. So you cannot rely on this workbench to let you delete databases and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. So how do we delete a database? Now we're going to use the drop database statement. So let me bring you to that reference. Okay. So the drop database. By the way, these statements are what we call data definition statements, as I've said in the lecture. All right. So drop database. Okay, and you will see that it is a very straightforward statement. Okay, so all we got to do is type drop database. You don't even need if exists. I mean, if you don't need it, and then finally the name. So if I want to get rid of the shoe store database using SQL, drop. Again, this is not case sensitive, so I can, just to prove it to you, I'm going to type this in lowercase. Okay, so drop database shoe store. Okay, I'm going to put a semicolon at the end, and I'm going to run this. Okay, so query execute. Now this is the only statement I got, so I can use either execute all or execute current, doesn't matter. Alright, so I've just ran it, and there's the result. I get a check mark. It says 0 rows affected. Now it's 0 rows because you're basically deleting, so you're not creating a record, or yeah, it's a little weird, but how do you verify that the database has been deleted? Well, remember this, the schemas. Okay. Now, but let's say you're not using the workbench. How do you list? How do you? Yeah, how do you list the databases that are inside the MySQL server? All right, but before that, let me save this. Okay, so I'm gonna go click Save Script, delete shoe store database. Okay. Right, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to open another query. Yep, I'm going to open another query tab. Not that this matters. I mean, you can pile on your statements in one tab, but I just want to start fresh. Okay, so how do you list the databases that are inside your MySQL server? Let's say you don't have access to this. I mean, this is great, but how do you use SQL to list them? Well, you can type show databases, semicolon, run it. Okay, and there you go. Alright, so if you missed that, let me repeat that again. So I don't want to save that, and I'm gonna create a new query tab. Okay, I'm gonna enlarge the font. So I'm gonna type show databases with an S. Okay, and then semicolon. That's all you need, and then run it. Okay, give it a give it a second or so, and then boom, right here you're gonna see a list of databases. So in fact, I'm seeing here databases that are not shown here. These are sort of internal to MySQL. So I got the information schema database, I got a MySQL database, performance schema database, a school database, and there's a test database. Okay, now these other databases, they're internally used by MySQL, so don't touch them. Don't be dropping them, because once you drop them, chances are you're messing up MySQL server in your computer, and you have to reinstall everything from scratch. Okay, so yeah, you can use that statement to um, show your databases, so to list your databases. Okay, and finally, okay, so I'm gonna save this. Oops. Go ahead and save this. Show me my databases. All right. So now, what I want to do is, I want to make changes to my database. Okay. So the statement for that is called alter database. Let me show you. All right. So we got the, just waiting for it to load, and let me collapse this. All right. So according to this, we got alter database. Okay, and you can put your specification here. Okay, there are other options available in the syntax. Okay, as you can see here. All right, so let's see, I want to change, let's say I want to change the collation setting uh, for our database. Okay, let's see, character sets, I shouldn't have closed that earlier. Okay, so just waiting for this to show up. But while we're waiting for that to show up, we can go ahead, type the statement alter database. Uh-oh. Alright, so anyway, while that's loading, alter database school. Okay, and according to the alter database syntax, so we can put here the alter specification. Okay, and according to the alter specification part is defined here. So we can put character set equals, so let's say we want to use, oops, you want to use, yeah, how about we use Big Five. Right. This is Big Five traditional Chinese. All right, so all right, so we're gonna put here Big Five. Okay. And then we can put um, collate equals Big Five Chinese CI. The CI stands for case insensitive. In other words, if you're searching for the word apple in lowercase, and let's say the word apple is typed in uppercase in your database, then it's gonna come up. Okay. Okay, so that's that, and let's see what the result of that will be. So let's execute. Okay, now it won't show us much here. Okay. Alright, then let's see. We got some other collation settings here, but that should change the collation setting of your database. Now, unfortunately, there's no easy way to verify this. So, well, actually, there's no easy way to verify this using SQL code. So just to quickly check it out, let's see. Use the schema inspector. Right, so I right-clicked on this database and I clicked on Schema Inspector, and this info tab is showing me indeed the collation has been changed to Big 5 Chinese CI, case insensitive. Character set is Big 5, alright, and the size of database, 0 bytes because it's empty. Okay, alright, so if I want to put it back to UTF-8, so let's just put it back to UTF-8. Yep. This one is UTF-8, General CI. General CI is right here. Click, click. Alright, let's run that. Okay. Now this is important, and I urge you to read the references that I linked to in my lecture thoroughly, because if you choose the wrong, say, character set, especially, um, you'll run into trouble storing certain kinds of characters from certain languages. So let's say you're storing, I don't know, let's say uh, English or maybe yeah, let's say Russian characters, Cyrillic characters as we call them, into let's say your database, but then your database configured to store only Chinese, traditional Chinese characters. So your database may not be able to encode or store those symbols properly. And that's how, and that's dangerous because you're messing up your data basically, all right? Or if there's any existing data and you inadvertently change the character set, that can hurt your database too. Okay. All right. So let's. Have I ran this? Yeah, I did. All right. So let's verify that. I'm gonna right-click school. I'm gonna use a schema inspector. Yep. So it's back to UTF-8 General CI and UTF-8 character set. So there you go. That's how you create databases. So you use the create database statement to to delete a database. You use drop database. And to alter the settings of your database, it's easy to remember. You have the alter database statement. Okay.